think we have maybe my fabulous co-presenter programmer, Catherine, can keep me honest here. Are we with a little break, or are we up with the next one? Someone tell me what's going on here.
So we are up with the next one. Break was for Apple's video.
Okay. All right. That was your break all. So next up, Zach and Kyle, do I gotcha?
You got us.
All right, gentlemen. I'll leave it to you.
Morning. Okay, awesome. Sounds good. So, appreciate you guys having Kyle and myself here to present. A lot of really great presentations so far, and hopefully everybody's having a good day. So, Kyle, anything you want to say as sort of an introduction?
I'll echo what Zach said. Thank you, Kevin and Catherine and everyone from Tableau for putting this on. And thank you, everybody, for attending. And we're really excited to show you what we got here.
All right, let's get started. So let's just start off with some introductions.
Yeah, hello again, everybody. Like I just said, my name is Kyle. I'm Kyle Massey. I am a DataDev ambassador for the first time this year. I am in a Tableau COE at JP Chase. I am the engineering lead. I always point this out. Zach is my boss. So when you see how poorly he treats me, feel sorry for me. Kidding. I specialize in automation and user experience. I also co-lead the Tableau Coders Initiative user group with Zach. I'm originally from Cincinnati, but I've lived in Columbus since 2004, where I went to the Ohio State University and never left. I live here in Columbus with my partner, Dan, and we have 2 pets, a dog and a cat. I love video games, true crime, anything, documentaries, podcast, doesn't matter, and house projects. We're in the middle of a kitchen renovation right now. I'm not doing that, but I've got plans this summer for the living room, the bathroom downstairs, the basement. Love to keep busy around the house. So, Zach, I'll pass it to you for your intro.
Awesome. I think Kyle's incorrect. I think most people know that it is an honor to have me as their boss, and would like nothing less in life. So with that said, I'm a Tableau visionary. This is my second term as a Tableau visionary. I'm also a DataDev ambassador. I've been part of the program since it started 3 years ago. I lead the engineering of all business intelligence and data visualization products at JP Chase. I'm also the co-leader of a couple initiatives, the Columbus Tableau Users Group, the Tableau Coders Initiative that Kyle was mentioning, and also Biz Office Hours with a couple other ambassadors in the community, where we present feedback about Tableau and other data visualization. I live in Springfield, Ohio, and I work in Columbus with Kyle. I live with my wife, my 2 kids, my 2 cats, my 2 dogs, like 2s for some reason. And similar to Kyle, I love gaming, true crime, and woodworking. So I like to build stuff with my hands as much as possible. Next slide here is just a little bit about the initiative that Kyle and I run. So Tableau Coders Initiative User Group. You can find this just by searching for #Tableau Coders on LinkedIn or Twitter. And this is a good opportunity if you want to hear more from Kyle and I, where we teach you how to code with Tableau APIs. So we went through a whole series last year on Python, where we touched Python along with the Tableau REST API. Right now, we're actually in the 2nd season of this, where we're teaching web development foundation and focus alongside the embedding API. So you can learn a little bit how to use HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and go along with us. And these are typically hosted every other week, and we add on each session where you can learn along with us, go along with us. So that said, what we've got for you today. So I'm going to start off with 7 quick code examples, talking a little bit about what you can do with the APIs themselves. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds and get too far into the details. We will make sure that all of the code that we share is available to you. I'll go through that, and then Kyle's going to show you how to kind of put that together, maybe add a little bit of polish and connect things, and actually build little applications in the art of the possible. We'll close out and see if we have any time left for each sort of question. 7 code examples. Let's go through them. So the first one I'm going to share is I'm going to show you a little bit about the REST API. So let me share my screen. I'm going to share this window over here. Button, entire screen, and should be coming right through. So let's see that, switch on over to that screen. We'll talk a little bit about code. So this is going to look familiar to those of you that have been on the session for the earlier sessions. We're using VS Code for everything that Kyle and I do. We both like this application with IDE. It's very useful for us to work across multiple different languages. So the first thing I'm going to show you is kind of my zero code example, and this is just signing. So what I really want to emphasize throughout these examples is the power of what you can do. It's really just a little bit of code. So there's not a lot going on here. I'll call out some of the things that are happening, importing the Tableau Server client library. This is just something that simplifies your coding so you don't have to go through every single mechanic of the steps of what you would want to happen inside of your script. This is some of the constant values. I'll note that I am sharing my personal access token, so I'm going to kill that right after the session is over. So if you're watching this in the future, it's not going to be working for you. And then we take this information, we log into the server, we're passing in these credentials, and it kind of just tells us what's going on. So I'm going to run this. We're just going to run from right here, and we'll see this come back through. And okay, so nothing really happening in this. It's just logging in. It's logged back out. I'm not persisting any messages or anything. It's just a very simple step here. The ones that we go to after this, you're going to see a little bit more happen. So over here in the login, you'll notice I had this kind of do stuff right here. We're going to start playing around with the do stuff. So everything else on the outside with these constants, with these values in the login, that's going to be the same. We're just adding a little bit more in the middle to do things. So to kind of demonstrate this, I'm going to show you my Tableau Cloud site. I will refresh, just show you I've got two things in here, two projects, Admin Insights and Default. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a project, something very simple. So I'm going to run through this same kind of script, and inside of this, I'm going to say, let's do a new project. Let's pass these details of this. So I'm basically saying I want permissions to be locked. I want the description to be project created for DataDev day, and then run this command. And this time I'm actually printing out some of the statements. What happened? What are the IDs and names of the thing that I created? So I'll run this one. We'll look down here to our terminal, and you'll see some stuff pop up. Project created. Here's your ID, your name, and the description. And now when we flip back over here, I hit refresh, we'll see that we've got a new project, DataDev, and it's kind of got the same stuff that we said, project created for DataDev. So quickly, in just a few lines of code, I was able to create a project with the REST API. We'll go through another example here with the REST API. I'll try my best to kind of update these slides at the same time. Next, we're going to create a subscription. So in this one, what I've done is I've got the same outside stuff, but I'm going to go into this middle area. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, grab some object IDs. So I've grabbed the target item, the schedule ID that I want to add the subscription to, and the user ID, which is myself. And basically, I'm just passing it in with some specific features, like what do I want the subscription to say, and messaging, and all that kind of stuff. And then create that on there. So I'm going to create this subscription right over here. We'll find a dashboard that I'm going to be using. Actually, I think I had it up over here. So I've got this amazing, beautiful NBA shots dashboard that I love. Author of that, he's an amazing guy, Zach Geis. Definitely look him up. You go over here, and we'll see there's no subscriptions to this dashboard. So let's see this actually happen. So I hit run. Run without debugging, and I've subscribed. Okay, great. So I swap back over here to my browser. Again, 0 subscriptions. Let's refresh, and we'll see one. We'll see that the subject is subscribed. It's got the details. I put it on the specific schedule that comes in weekday mornings. Lots of stuff set up there. Where I can now get a subscription, and I can get that through, some code. So again, very simple. Again, it's just adding on. So I have these scripts on the outside, the pieces of the script on the outside to log in and pass credentials, things like that. I then take and add a few things to it. So pass in some values, provide the targets, and create a script or create a subscription. And that's it. So that is the REST API, a couple simple examples of what you can do with that. So let's switch over to our next one. We're going to talk about the Embedding API. So Embedding API is completely different. We're working with things like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. No CSS in this one really, except for a little bit of inline stuff. But this is a very simple document where I want to just embed a Tableau dashboard inside of a website. Again, relatively simple. What I've got here is this is kind of our boilerplate information at the top, things that make the website tick. It's all pretty standard general stuff like the title and the tags and things like that. But then I've got a few other things happening. So I'm calling an initialize viz function through JavaScript, which is down below. And basically I'm saying inside of these things, and I'll show you kind of what I'm talking about. I've got a header bar, I've got a layout of a few things, and then I've got a little bit of JavaScript. A lot of this stuff is just really just copy it from the documentation about these APIs, put it in your set, and you're good to go. But this little bit of code here, if I run this one, that's going to pop out over here. And now what do I got? I've got a simple website with a header bar at the top, navigation bar kind of thing. I've got a nice little card on the outside, title, and then an interactive version of a dashboard. Again, really beautiful dashboard that was built by the amazing Geis author. He's just incredible. You should look him up. So
so humble.
So humble. Yeah, I actually hear that he's the best at being humble. He's really good at it.
Yeah.
So it's not your turn, Kyle. Shush. So the embed with buttons, we're just going to add on to this a little bit. So this is really the same script that we had over here, and we're just going to add a few things to it. So we look at this, a lot of the same kind of stuff, initialize viz, blah, blah, blah. But there's two specific updates and differences that I've got here that I want to kind of show. So I've got these different buttons. So I've got little button icons that call to different on-click functions. They're little images. They're on this kind of setup here. And then those pass down into a couple other functions that are stored here, which are very simple. So to add these buttons that I'm going to show you just in a second, all I need is 3 lines of code to say, create some buttons, and then 3 little snippets of code that say, here's how to use those buttons. This is what to do when I actually click on those. So let me actually close out of this real quick, and then I'm going to run this one. It's going to look pretty much the same, but I got 3 buttons at the top right. So I wanted to get these a little cleaned up. I didn't get a chance to, but they still work and they show kind of the functionality of what you can do here. So I can click the PDF and we'll see that PDF jump up in here. I can click download data. It's going to drop the data download. I can download an image. So you can kind of imagine a little bit more the art of the possible here. I could make these whole series of nicely built icons. I could build like a options menu bar that you can select and do different things with. Just exposing some of the features and functionality that you have inside of your Tableau visualization and your toolbar, and exposing those to the website. And Kyle's going to show you a little bit more about what you can do with kind of having that sort of two-way communication setup inside of what you do. Okay, so let's go over here to the next one. So again, what we just showed, let me flip my slide. So we did this one with the simple embed and the call external functions. So we got 4 down. Let's go to the next one. So now I'm going to flip over to the metadata API. And there was a little bit talked about that in a couple of the last sessions. Vorpal kind of talked about that a little bit. So we're going to flip over to this. So the metadata API is where you want to maybe get some data about what's happening in your server environment. So I might want to get a list of workbooks and what they're connected to, and what databases they're connected to, and how the upstream, downstream kind of changes impact things that are happening. Is very powerful, and it's actually really pretty easy to use. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to use it. So I'll flip over here to the object list, and we'll start with this. So number 5, object list. So some of the stuff here is going to look similar because this does use, it's on top of the REST API, and we can use the Tableau server client. I'll explain kind of this pandas thing in a second. I think we actually heard a little bit about that previously as well from Vorpal. But again, constant values are passed in. We've got this simple little script that's running right here, this function that we built that just passes a query. Some authentication protocols, slightly different than what we had before, just because we're bringing back some data from it. And then this little extra bit of code is just to clean it up, make it a little bit easier to see. And that's what the Panda data frame is, more of a data sciencey kind of addition to Python, a library for Python, but it's useful here. So let's see what happens when I send a query to the Metadata API that says, give me the name of the workbooks. And so when I run this, we'll see it pop back up, run for a moment, and we see the data. So in this particular site that I'm connected to, we've got these 11 or so workbooks and the names of them. So pretty simple. And we can continue to add on this, and I'll show that in the next example. But what I do want to highlight is kind of the simplicity of how you can use this without even coding, really. So if you go to a Tableau server like this one, and it doesn't have to be Tableau Cloud, it could be Tableau Server. As long as this permission is, or this feature is turned on, you can actually take this and go to metadata. Actually, sorry, I want to go here and metadata / graphical, just like this. So you want to go to your URL, metadata, graphical, and you're going to actually get a built-in little coding screen that you can use for typing up, playing around, learning about GraphQL. And this is very easy to use. So a couple things you can do in here. You can just paste that code that I just said. You know, it didn't format very good, but it's fine. I can make that look nice. Use this printify button, push run, and I'll get the same kind of thing that I mentioned before. So I've got a nice list of names, objects there. And I'm going to go over here. I am hearing a little feedback. Somebody's not muted, maybe. I'll go over here, and this next example that we're going to go to is a little bit more built in. So I actually stole this example from Anya, who was just presenting just about 20 minutes ago. Definitely, she is the biggest guru when it comes to the Metadata API, has some great articles and resources, and a lot of good examples of code. And this is one that she built for building a full data dictionary. If I run this one actually has all these things. So it says, give me the calculated fields, and for every calculated field, give me the name, the description, the data type, et cetera, et cetera. And shows you it's a little difficult to read here, but we'll pass it over to the other side where we were just looking in the browser, and we'll run it here. Make it look a little nice. And then we run this, and we'll get this nice little kind of JSON response to what's happening here. So we've got the names, the list, and really cool. You can get into some things that are very difficult to get otherwise, like the calculations. So I can actually get to a list of the fields, but not only that, I can see what are the calculations. And maybe I might want to look at this for a workbook or a series of workbooks and filter that, and maybe ask the developers why they did a calculation a certain way. And you can use this, you know, a lot of different ways to send alerts, things like that. A lot of cool things that you can do with the Metadata API. Okay, so let's see this next slide. We are now on kind of our final example, which is for the Hyper API. And so I'm going to create an extract. Again, something that has been mentioned a couple times in some of the other sessions, but good to kind of show this. So I'm just going to close this and go over here. So the extract API, or sorry, the Hyper API rather, can be a little bit more complex than some of the others. There's a few more things you got to do. You have to import a few different things from the Tableau Hyper API library. You got to kind of give it some information about what you're connecting to and where you want to run it from, things like that. So there's quite a few things happening here, but again, still rather simple when you just kind of take this out and chunk it out by, you know, one step at a time. So it creates a new private local Hyper instance. It creates a file. It creates the data and the schema within the file, and then it saves it. So to kind of highlight this example, what I've done is I've created a very simple CSV file. And it's the columns here are, this is DataDev. if you can't see it, I can zoom in right there. It's probably a little bit easier for you to read. Actually, it's really important data. So, we have the option to take this data and turn it into a hyper file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back out and I'm going to run this. So I'm going to run this without debugging. Give it a second. All the only kind of write out that I've got here, the print statement is the connection is closed, so I'm done. And what I can do now is open up my Tableau desktop. I'm going to connect to a file. And now you'll see published data. And I forgot to mention that that's what I call it on the publish is I've got this set up as the published data.hyper right here. And so now if I open this in Tableau desktop, you will see this data that I just mentioned. And I can very easily put in this is DataDev. Maybe reorder this a little bit because it doesn't completely work, and maybe we just want to exclude Kyle. So that's kind of my tips. Now the last thing I'll kind of close out with before I pass it over to Kyle is when we look at the slide here. It's not only about looking at these different APIs as one at a time. There's a lot of opportunities here. An example could be we would connect to the Metadata API to pull all the information that we need about our Tableau server environment. And then we would take that data and we would pass it to the Hyper API to create a stored Hyper file that we can use that can then be connected to a workbook that can be published back up to Tableau server via the REST API, maybe a newly created project with the REST API. And then you can take that and embed it inside of a website with the Embedding API. And that's just kind of within 15, 20 minutes here, a little bit about what you can do with the different APIs. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Kyle, and he's going to show you a little bit more about what you can do with the APIs.
Thank you, Zach. Great examples there. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's get this here, make sure I share the right one. So I want to share the entire screen. All right, so, well, wait a second. Did that share come up? It's asking me over and over again. Let's try again. Share.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Should be coming now, I think. You seeing it? It says I'm sharing. Let me try stopping it and starting again. Oh, we love tech troubles on the fly, don't we? All right, screen one. Let's try this again. There we go.
There it is. He did it, guys.
All right. All right. We got it. We got it. All right. So as Zach was saying, in his examples, those were little chunks of code to get started. So you could kind of see that the progression and how few lines it actually takes to do certain actions. What I'm going to show you now is kind of a way to take some of those things that Zach showed you and some other things and chain them together using some web technologies and some API technologies to really start building out more of little applications that can help you automate tedious processes or things that are really prone to human error, things like that that are really great for your developers or your support team or your users, whatever the case may be. So real quick, what I'm showing you now is what's referred to as a SPA, or a single page application built in Vue.js, which is just a JavaScript framework. You may be familiar with things like React or Angular. Vue is just another flavor of that same concept. And I'm running a backend because I want to use Python using Flask. Now, for the onboarding example specifically, I have a session coming up later this afternoon where I'm going to do a real deep dive into that. So I am going to show it here along with a couple other things and then show some of the code. But if you're interested in onboarding specifically, I will spend much more time explaining every part of the process in my session later this afternoon. But that being said, let's jump right in here and kind of show what we can do here. So you can see on the screen, I just have a very simple form here. Say, I want to create a brand new project on Tableau server. And just for education here, I've kind of laid out what I'm going to do. I'm going to sign in. I'm going to create a project. I'm going to create a group. I'm going to create a user. I'm going to add the user to the group. And I'm going to add permissions to the project and then sign out, all based on this form input. So if I go in here and say, let's just call this DataDev Day 23. We'll call it, we'll give the group DataDevs, no big deal. And I will go ahead and add this guy who I know just randomly. And so just with me, the user having to enter these three things, I click create. It's going to think for a minute. Got a little, get my little loader going on here. So it's going through all of those steps in order, like I said. And what I'll get here as soon as it's done is a confirmation screen, kind of like what Zach printed out before, but I've got my new project details. So there's the project name, the LUID, the group, the LUID, the user, the LUID. And if I jump over here to my developer sandbox and refresh, I can prove that I wasn't lying to you. We can see there's now a project called DataDev Day 23, and it was created on June 15th, so just a moment ago. And if I go in here and look at the permissions, I can see that a group called DataDevs has published permissions. Now I could customize that, and I'll show a little bit more of like how to apply different permissions based on the role in the longer onboarding session later on. But just to show you, I created a group, added the user, and gave it permissions all within about 30 seconds, you know, if that. So if I kind of jump over and take a look at what's happening here, and 1 second, I've got to lock and unlock my screen. All right, let's take a look at VS Code now. So if I go into, this is Flask. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about Flask specifically. Oh, and I did want to say, I've seen the question I saw the question multiple times while Zach was presenting. All of this code will be on GitHub. We'll make sure that the links are shared in the presentation. So if you're having trouble following along, you will be able to dive in later to all of the code. So this is basically what I'm showing you is just Flask boilerplate stuff. This is how you start Flask and what Flask is really for. Did my screen stop sharing? Sorry.
Yeah, I was about to jump in and say that. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine or Nigel. I will reshare here. I think that's probably because I had to lock. It's coming. All right, so we're back. So apologies for that. So what I was saying is this stuff at the top is mostly just boilerplate Flask stuff to get it up and running. And what Flask lets me do is create endpoints. And in the API technology, that's basically the URL. So what I can say here is if I send a request here to an endpoint called /onboard, then this is what I want it to do. So I see what I'm doing here is I'm taking the response that was given to me, the JSON of the request that was sent to the endpoint, and then I'm just running these three methods here. So if I control click and look at, so create a Tableau project, this is very, very similar to what Zach showed you before. So we're just running that through. And what I return here is just the dictionary of the new project. That is Python speak, meaning I want it sent back to me as a Python dictionary so that the API can handle it and not as a Tableau, as a TSC project item, which, you know, beyond the scope of this conversation, but just so you know that's what that's doing. And then same thing, I'm going to create, the next step is to create a server group, which is within this same file here. And one thing that I've done is I've kind of abstracted out this get server off. And that's just so I don't have to keep repeating these same things over and over again. But essentially, this is just me getting my server and signing and my credentials set up. And then with server off sign-in is where the fun starts, as we saw in Zach's examples. So very similar to a project item, I'm just declaring a new group item. I'm telling it here because this was intended to be like a developer group. I'm giving them the role of Explorer can publish, and then server.groups.create, and same thing, returning the dictionary. So you're going to see a pattern here that the TSC makes it very easy to perform, you know, functions that take several clicks in the UI and rely on being sort of precise, and makes them super quick and super easy. And one thing I will say is we could forego the backend API here and do all of these as REST API calls with the bodies instead of using Python. I think that's messy. It's my opinion. I just prefer to do it this way because it's a lot easier to read, but it depends on how you want to do it. So similarly with user, we're seeing a pattern here. So one thing I am doing here is if I try to add a user on the site, even if it's for a new project and the user already exists, TSC will throw an error. So I'm handling that by saying, if getting the existing users with the email that was provided. And if that user exists, then I just return that. If it doesn't, then what I'm saying here is similarly declaring a new user item, server.user.add. We can see how we're kind of chugging along here. Add user to group. This is using same logic here. We sign in, and I'm filtering for the group name. Now, this is the group name that I just created, so I know it exists. In other cases, you may need to do some filtering and logic on if it doesn't exist, create it, whichever. But I know this group exists, and I have the user ID because I created it right before that. So I'm just saying server.groups.add user. Give it the group, give it the user's LUID, and that's all there is to it. The next one, add project permissions. Project permissions can get a little bit more complicated. I did see that there was a question about this specifically, so this is scratching the surface of that, but happy to talk offline. So what I'm saying here is I'm getting the project, I'm getting the group based on projects and groups.filter with the names that I know to be correct. And then I have this server.projects.update permission, which takes a TSC permission rule, but really all I'm defining in there is the group and then the capabilities. So in this case, I only added capabilities at the project level for this example. So I'm adding the read capability to allow and write to allow. So I'm going to keep it moving in the interest of time. I know that was fast, but like I said, if you're interested in onboarding automation specifically, I'd recommend joining the session a little later. So let's move on to published content. I think this came up as a question as well. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to sign in, get a list of projects. I'm going to select a file. I'm going to publish it. And we're going to see how quickly this goes. So I'm going to click Get Started here. And what I'm doing when I click Get Started is actually querying all of the projects on my site so that I can populate a dropdown. I don't want the user to just freeform it. They'll screw it up. So if I go down here, I can see the project that we just created. And I'm going to upload a workbook. Now, because I'm running this from my local machine, I need to just copy the path to the file. If this were going to be put in a production or running on a web server, we could do an actual file selector and make it not have the user do this. But for this example, I've got the path to the workbook I want to publish. I hit publish, do my standard little thinkings, swirling, and your workbook has been published. Click here to view. And so when I publish a workbook, the API actually gives me the URL back. So I can give a link to the user that says, hey, I did it. Here's your workbook. And you can see it's right here in the project, just like we would expect. Real quick, I'm going to go real quickly through that one because a lot of this sign in and things like that are going to be similar. So let me jump over to the publish endpoint. Okay, so I've got a publish, and really I've got one method here, publish item to Tableau server. I'm going to skip the top ones and just kind of look at this, but you can see all I'm really doing here is saying I have an if, or if I selected workbook or data source because the endpoint changes. But really, I declare a workbook item by passing in the project LUID for where I want it to land, and then server.workbooks.publish with the item I just created. And then that file path is what I pasted in, so it knows where to look on my local machine. If you were using a server, you would have the file itself, et cetera. And then I'm telling it if it exists, overwrite it. If it doesn't, and send me the dictionary. So let's keep it moving here. One other example in this little patch of code. And once again, my screen is locked up. I'm sorry about that. Need to figure out why this keeps happening for this afternoon. So I got to reshare again. Apologies. I'm running a little short on time too. So there we go. All right. So now if I jump back over, and I look at automated cleanup. So if you have a big environment, it's very likely that you have lots of junk that's been sitting there and hasn't been touched in a long time. Let's try to target that. So if I want to say, give me everything that hasn't been updated since May 1st. You might want to go back a little longer than that. But for this example, I'll set that date and click find items. And I can make a simple UI here where I can have a delete button. I can delete all of them if I want to be really aggressive about it. We could make a button that says notify owner. You're really getting into the point where whatever you want an application to do, the API will probably support you, or someone has figured out how to do it. So definitely encourage you to explore the art of the possible there. I'm going to jump over and just show filtering on this really quick. The delete is actually not implemented because that's dangerous. But I'm going to show you filter items on Tableau server. So there's a couple different ways we can do this. I chose to do this with raw Python filtering because of some of the limitations on request options. I'll let you read through that in the code. But essentially, all I'm saying here is I'm splitting the date because it came through as a string and saying, give me anything where the date time is less than, or sorry, excuse me, where the updated is less than the time that I sent. And that's where I got that list of items. So real quick, the last couple of things, and I feel like Ewout kind of stole some of my thunder on this by showing his really great examples of embedding, but I want to show you how you can work that into an application even more, and maybe a little scaled back to show a little bit more what's going on here. So this is another SPA. This is just another instance of a Vue.js project. And you can see, I've done some simple embedding here. I've got a viz on a card with a nav bar, and I've got these tabs along the top that allow me to toggle. So I can have a simple scatter plot, and I get my standard Tableau interactions. But what if I have something that has filters, and I want to just use the web applications filters instead of the filters from Tableau? I can do that. And so I've just got check marks now that let me interact with the viz, just as if I was changing them from the built-in Tableau filters, but I can customize them. I can put them wherever I want. I can make them images. I can make them sliders, whatever I want to do, whatever is appropriate. I have full control over that two-way communication between my application, my web application, my SPA, and the viz on Tableau server. So same thing, another example here. This viz has a parameter that changes the measure or the aggregation on the map. So if I want my users to be able to explore, okay, this is what average profit looks like, but this is what average sales look like, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the other thing that I can do is I can actually read the underlying data from the visualization into the app. So if I have a user that's looking at, let's say, average discount, in this case, bigger and redder is bad. If I want to see what's going on in this corner over here, select some marks, and boom, I can have a table off to the side with those marks. So this enables users to do some self-exploring, say, I really want to look at this specific set of data right here, right now, in a tabular form. They can do that. And I can even take it so far as including an export button. And now the user that, the stereotypical, I want the data, can I put it in Excel user can now do that. They've got a CSV with the data that they selected. So I'm going to stop there. I know we did have a couple questions and we're short on time. Happy to answer questions on the side. Hit us up on Twitter, LinkedIn, whichever. But hopefully this gives you a little bit more of an impression of you can do whatever you want when you start working with web applications and the APIs.
Yeah, and just real quick, because we have one last slide we wanted to share. So a couple additional resources for DataDevs here. So we do recommend, Kyle, I think I'm hearing background for yours.
Okay.
Yeah. So Tableau Developer Program, you've heard about this all throughout the day. You're going to continue to hear about it. Definitely sign up for that. There's a lot of good REST API documentation, and I would especially call out the new REST API Postman collection, which makes it very easy for you to, get some sample code that you can start playing around with in Postman. The Embedding Playground just started coming out and kind of, a beta stage for you to start playing around with, building your own simple drag and drop application with the Embedding API. And then definitely join Kyle and I, because we're awesome and we want to have more people join us for the Tableau Coders Initiative, where we'll teach you more about how to code with the Tableau APIs. And I think that's probably about it. I don't know, Kevin, do we have any time for questions or?
I don't think so. And there are a lot of questions. I'm really trying to get to them. Maybe Dan will take a few minutes off here. I do want to ask, or I do want to answer. A lot of people are asking about data sources, updating your data sources with the REST API. And I'll take this one. It's kind of on us. This isn't really a good answer I have for you. We don't, you can update your data sources through the method of pulling down the workbook, updating the connection details, and then republishing the workbook. This is not API driven. There is a document API that is unsupported at the moment, which has some hiccups with it, but it's still possible to use it. I wouldn't really recommend it, but it is still there. So It's a choppy experience with data sources. We know, we've heard it. I see a lot of questions about it. I wish I had a better answer for you. It is something we've looked at for a very long time. It is not an easy problem to solve. I will tell you that. If it was, we would do it. So I'm still happy to answer those questions. Again, find us on LinkedIn or come to Slack or email. I put that in the main slide. So you find me somewhere and I'm happy to talk about that. Or get all of your feedback and put it into the engineering team. That is my ask. If you have these questions and you want these things, let me know and I will put the ask into the engineering team. That is part of my job.